It's been a full year since the release of Spider-Man PS4. When the game was released, it received praise from fans and critics alike, with the game quickly becoming popular with pretty much every demographic of gamer imaginable. But do the people love this game for the game? Or do they just love this game because they rode the hype train all the way there? Let's find out.
I love you. But now?
Pizza time.
When I think about this game, one of the first things I remember is the hype and anticipation I had for it. I remember being really anxious and skeptical when I first saw the footage. I didn't think the game could possibly be that good. After all, Spider-Man games the last decade have been a bit of an emotional roller coaster. And I mean, I grew up playing Spider-Man games, and while I never had all of them, I still managed to get my hands on most of the good ones. Spider-Man 2000 was my first game ever, so that alone set the bar pretty high in and of itself. After that, I remember playing the movie game, Spider-Man 2, and Ultimate, but after Ultimate Spider-Man, I remember the quality of the games curving downward exponentially. By the time Web of Shadows came out, it was just okay. It was a fun game gameplay-wise, I really enjoyed the combat, but the city around Spider-Man was completely soulless. There were so many reused textures and assets everywhere, and the acting was so bad, and the writing was just as awful.
Oh God!
Honestly, out of every Spider-Man game released after 2005, I think the only one that was actually good was Shattered Dimension.
So, what'd I miss?
What the?
Nuff said, kids. Nuff said.
But even it had its flaws. I never ended up playing Edge of Time, but I found the first Amazing game to be an amazingly disappointing, soulless, unfinished mess. I was so upset by it that I never even bothered buying the second Amazing game. But luckily, all of my fears and anxiety were for naught. Because from the first moments of its opening cutscene, I was taken on an instant nostalgia trip, remembering exactly how I felt playing Spider-Man 2 for the first time over 15 years ago. I remember that experience so vividly because I had bugged my parents for weeks about getting this game. But by the time my parents finally took me to Walmart to get the game, it was already night and I had to go to bed as soon as I got home. So I didn't even get to play it until the next morning. But I woke up early and I played it, and I played it all day. I didn't stop a single time except for once to eat a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I think that was the longest continuous gaming session of my life, and it's the most memorable one too. I was just having so much fun experiencing all this new stuff for the first time in this big open world. Spider-Man 2 was my first open world game. It introduced me to the genre. And that's exactly how I felt when I started this game too. I felt like such a kid again. And honestly, I haven't smiled that wide playing a video game in a long time. I just can't remember the last time a video game made me feel this good. And on top of being fun to play, it's more faithful to the comics than ever before. This game is a love letter to over half a century of Spider-Man stories, pulling from every part of Spider-Man's lore and history, from the Ultimate comics to the Ditko era to the newer films and even the Raimi films. There's really a little bit of everything in this game, and it all mixes together so well. I think there are definitely some valid criticisms of the game, but we're going to talk about those later. Up front, let's just talk about the good stuff.
Okay, only this time, just let me have it. Right on the job, okay? I can... Oh,
The lore and history of this new Spider-Verse feels every bit as rich as the 616. And I think that's one of the reasons that the whole Spider-Man PlayStation 4 is the best Spider-Man movie thing got popular and started spreading around, and honestly, it's pretty true. This game does a really good job nailing the characterization of its core cast. Every single character in the game has clear motivations, and they all come across as extremely compelling. Not to mention that Yuri Lowenthal is spot on as Pete.
I love a challenge.
You break it, you buy it.
I thought you trusted me.
I was a little skeptical at first, but they really made the best choice they could have possibly made in terms of voice actor. Yuri Lowenthal is right up there with Reno Romano as one of my favorites now. And Spider-Man has such great banter with pretty much every character in the game.
Sorry to cook and run.
Did you just leave your clothes on the kitchen floor?
Spider-Man's relationships with the people around him are a fundamental part of the character, and those connections and characterizations are every bit as important to the game as web swinging and wall crawling are. Having an older Peter Parker really helped flesh out the feeling of this world, with him already establishing a rapport with all of his villains and allies. And the game doesn't feel the need to hold your hand and introduce you to concepts through needless exposition. Insomniac just shoves you into the fray and lets you figure it out as you go along, just like Peter Parker. One of the great ways they flesh out the world of the game is that you find backpacks all throughout the city. There are a ton of nods to the comic continuity through these backpacks and different landmarks all around the city. I really enjoyed their presence, and I feel like it really helped add to the depth of the world.
Oh yeah, that blind guy gave me his card in case Spider-Man ever needs a lawyer. Wait, hold on. If he's blind, how did he know I was Spider-Man?
Having an older Peter also affords us the opportunity to see things that we've never seen in the films before. Like a veteran Spider-Man that's fought at least 10 major supervillains in the past 8 years before the start of the game. Throughout the game, Mary Jane acts as a partner for Peter, helping him get information and sneak around in ways that Spider-Man can't or wouldn't really think to. Despite some more annoying sections of gameplay, I really liked MJ and who she is as a character in this game, as well as the role that she plays in Spider-Man's world. The relationship between Peter and MJ was one of the most compelling parts of the game to me. Everything from their dialogue to their unspoken body language was all really telling of the characters' relationships and history. I know it sounds odd, but I think the story that was being told between those two characters wasn't really in what they said to each other. The story that was being told was in what they weren't saying to each other. And I think that's ultra realistic and ultra similar to interactions between people around that age in similar situations. And the way they portray their text messages was something really great that a lot of games and movies screw up. I love the way that Peter stops whatever he's doing to read the message and try to think of a response, no matter where he is or what he's doing, even if he's just on the side of a random wall. These are the things that make Spider-Man feel like a spider person instead of
Where's
just...
Cage and his search party? The civilian volunteers! Pretty redhead, arming a gas! You are no help! That APC!
I also really enjoyed Miles' story arc, which was surprisingly tragic. What I liked best about his role in the game is that Miles doesn't just seem like a last-minute addition to add an auxiliary spider character as a comic reference. Instead, he actually plays a really crucial role in the plot, and in Peter's life in general, slowly but surely becoming the little brother that Peter never had. And Police Captain Yuri Watanabe was another standout character too. I loved the banter between her and Peter,
Thanks for that.
especially
Now
when it
I'm
came
seeing
down
an
to Spider
assault near
Cop.
you.
You're in luck, Yuri. Your favorite tough but lovable, grizzled, seen-too-much detective is in town.
What? No. You promised you wouldn't do that
Spider Cop.
One of the things I thought that was really interesting was that the voice actors for Yuri and Peter are actually married in real life, which is why they have the amazingly charismatic chemistry that they do. And on top of all of that, there was so much stuff in the game that came as a complete surprise because it was left out of the promotional material entirely, including but not limited to the game's main villain and final boss, Doc Ock. Octavius' development over the course of the game was really heartbreaking and tragic. When Norman pulled his funding, my heart broke. I feel like I knew exactly how Octavius felt, and I could understand why he resented Norman so much. But you either die a hero, or live long enough to see yourself in a tacky green jumpsuit. Just when it seems like things couldn't get worse for Peter, they do, when he's betrayed by his own mentor and role model. In the final boss battle, you can really feel a lot of what Peter's feeling, especially after you find out that Octavius had known that you were Spider-Man the whole time, and he still tried to kill you anyway.
Parker.
You knew? I tried to warn you, Peter, but you didn't listen.
This game is just filled with so many emotional moments. From Mary Jane and Peter's awkward knot date,
Love seeing you two together again. You always were my favorites.
to Ock losing funding.
Damn it! This is all your fault, Norman.
What happens to Jefferson Davis at the Osborne rally, the last boss fight, and Peter's conversation with Ock following.
That wasn't me. You said you'd never abandon me. You promised. Remember? And of course, you'll rest easy, knowing your secret is safe with me.
And finally, the ending, which I think is the most emotional part of the game altogether. Peter actually ends up making the opposite of the choice he made in One More Day, which was great, and it really had me in tears. The game is one giant emotional roller coaster that'll take you for a ride. All the characters grow and develop in a really natural way, making this game a huge reminder of exactly how much games have evolved as an art form and how much they continue to grow in size and scope. Back in 2004, Spider-Man 2 was the rare exception to the rule that licensed games always suck. But now you can fast forward 14 years later and see this game as an example of what people should be expecting from AAA franchises and developers. Which, by the way, kudos to Insomniac for not throwing loot boxes or microtransactions into the game. Because honestly, the way the suit mechanic is built, it seems like it was almost made for something like that.
Damn it!
But they didn't. They didn't throw any of that nonsense into the game. And I'm really proud of them for that. They let you unlock things the old-fashioned way, with tokens, coins, and in-game currency that's actually earned from playing the game. Compare that to any Arkham game, where you end up paying $30 to $50 for a season pass that only has a couple of 10-minute DLC episodes and about 10 costumes, compared to Spider-Man's 50-something. They really went above and beyond with adding extra systems to the game to make New York City feel more immersive and real. The subway fast travel system is really clever, but to be honest, I think I only ever used it once, and that was when I stumbled upon it by accident. I remember seeing the developers talk about it in interviews and thinking it was clever, but I had become so wrapped up in the game that I had already spent hours playing the game before I even noticed it or remembered it. I think by the time I finally stumbled on it, I was almost at the end of the game. Web swinging and zipping around New York City is just so much fun that I never really felt the need to bother with fast travel. And speaking of New York City, I loved all the Marvel references. I never expected to see Alias Investigations or even Josie's in a game, but they're all here. The number of Defenders references around the city is mildly suspicious. But speaking of team-ups, I think it was odd to feature so many prominent Marvel locations from across the board without actually featuring or mentoring any of the characters who inhabit them. There's never a Tony or Steve name drop or even a mention of a team-up. No one cameos even briefly. The only specific references to other Marvel characters are sticky notes on Peter's desk that say to call TS or RR about a job, which could be a reference to Tony Stark or Reed Richards. You'd think there'd at least be a line like, "I'm no Stark, but I'll see what I can do," but no. No name drops, no cameos, nothing. This is especially odd considering that Spider-Man 2000 did the whole superhero cameo thing really well in the past in one of Spider-Man's most formative video games almost 20 years ago.
Pretty easy.
Your spider sense won't save you here.
Look who's talking, Daredevil. You've been looking at my cards all night.
I don't need to look at your cards, Punisher. Your bluffs are so obvious.
Okay. Let's keep this a nice, friendly, clean game.
Who keeps inviting this guy?
Hey, will you guys keep it down?
I really hope that the sequel can feature more Marvel characters and superheroes outside of the core cast of Peter's Inner Circle, because it felt really weird seeing these superhero locales without ever seeing a single superhero. But on the other hand, I was really surprised to see the multitude of references to Spider-Man's online fandoms, with stuff like the Spider Squad token, Greg Miller's shirtless Spider-Man at the Halloween party, or the frequent Bomb Squad missions. The game even references past Spider-Man games like this.
All I did was save this kid's balloon from floating away, and he made me this. It's the little things that make it all worth it.
But to be honest, I think that Ultimate Reference did a little bit better. There's just so many great things about this game. I think the game really had the potential to be a 10 out of 10, but there are a few shortcomings that really hold the game back from reaching its full potential. So now we're going to delve into what I disliked about the game. Sometimes it can be really hard to stick to the walls, and a lot of the times you don't even land where you want to land, and getting to the exact spot that you want to get to can take some finagling. But I can kind of understand the difficulty of traveling slowly because it's a trade-off for the high-speed locomotion. If moving slowly has to be messed up to make the web swinging, zipping, and wall rolling function properly, then so be it. It is what it is. But I still hope it gets ironed out in time for a sequel. And the MJ and Miles missions are alright at times, but when they get bad, they're just really bad. I really liked MJ's first mission in the museum, and the mission where Miles has to hide from Rhino, but the other missions are just repetitive and unbearable. And dying in these missions is just annoying.
I feel!
I know they did this to diversify the gameplay, but I think it makes the game a lot worse when you go from
true superhero action thriller, packed to the brim with thrills and chills,
to stealthily sneaking around and getting killed every 5 seconds.
and of course,
No! I'm going to die!
I really wish that the Mary Jane and Miles sections of the game had been just as skippable as the minigames. You go from running 100 miles an hour across the city to this slow-moving character that can't really fight or do much. I think one of the best ways they could have improved these sections would be to give MJ and Miles more gadgets and more ways to beat the bad guys. Maybe it's possible that MJ could have had an old web shooter that Peter had left at her apartment, and she could use that for distractions, or even to trick the villains into thinking that Spider-Man's there. I just think these levels needed more variation. They feel like an afterthought more than an intended part of the experience. But speaking of things that need more variation, those minigames. They are so frustrating and annoying. Why are you making me do math when I want to throw people off of buildings and shoot finger guns?
Run, but I'll catch you later.
Not if I catch you first.
And all of this is made even worse once you realize you can just turn off these sequences of the game entirely. It's like Donkey said.
You can tell that they were really proud of this part of the game when they have a button that just lets you skip it entirely.
And why did they turn the Scorpion into Scarecrow from the Arkham series? The poison hallucination fumes are the exact same thing as the Ivy plumes and Fear Gas in Arkham Knight. They're literally and shamelessly the exact same levels. I could be wrong, but in all of my years of reading comics, I've never seen Scorpion able to do anything remotely similar to this. But if I'm wrong though, let me know in the comments. But you know what? That's not even the only thing this game rips from the Arkham series. The scenes where you're chasing Mr. Negative feel suspiciously similar to the Ra's al Ghul sections of the Arkham games. And all the Black Cat side missions feel mildly insulting and unrewarding, because they're basically in-game advertising for the DLC.
Oh, hey Spider.
And speaking of DLC, I think that the 3 packs that are out right now are pretty solid, and I love all the new costumes. I'm pretty satisfied with the DLC we got, even though I do wish the DLCs had been maybe an hour longer apiece. Ultimately, there are a lot of problems that keep this game from being a solid 10 in my eyes, but it does come really close. So that being said, I'd still give it a solid 9.5, which is nothing to thwip a web at by any means. So looking back on Spider-Man PS4 1 year later, I feel like it delivered on pretty much everything it promised. It was really everything I could have hoped for and more. Minus a few cameos anyway. I'm pretty excited to play the sequel in a few years, which, by the way, really quick game theory about that, spoiler warning I guess, I think Norman is making symbiotes to cure Harry and stealing tech from other companies as Green Goblin to do it, and eventually Peter and Miles are going to get in over their heads, and Peter's going to need the symbiote to heal himself. But the symbiote is going to take control of him and turn him into Venom and send him on an uncontrollable rampage, and Miles is going to have to stop him with the Venom Blast. But that's just a game theory, and I guess we'll see how much of that I got right in a few years. But if your Spider-Man sequel theory is different than mine, I'd love to hear it in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed the video, then be sure to like it, and if you want to see more Super Swim Team 7, then be sure to check out these playlists, and then subscribe and turn that notification bell on. Thanks for watching, everybody. This has been Swim Team Captain 7 from Super Swim Team 7, signing off. I can use